Good afternoon. This is the story about the miracle of Tepayac by John Steinbeck. John Steinbeck tells you about a type of knowledge that is understood only gradually, and one which each person finds for himself. Faith is made visible in Juan Diego's story. Okay, let's start. The Spanish came to Mexico with war and pestilence and ruin, but they brought also the faith of Jesus Christ and his mother Mary. Many of the Indian people were baptized, and among the first of them Juan Diego and his wife Maria Lucia. They were humble people, and they lived in the little town of Cuautitlan, Cuautitlan, to the north of Mexico. For many years they had lived together in felicity. They had no children, so that their dependence on each other was very great. Their dwelling was a one-room hut of mud bricks, and they tended a garden, and they were happy. Then, one dawn, Maria Lucia was feverish, and at mid-morning her eyes were swollen, and her breath labored. At noon she died. They had lived in love, and Juan Diego was lost in his sorrow. He had no relatives, but the uncle named Juan Bernardino, who had cared for him in his youth. Now that his wife was dead, Juan Diego took to wandering over the hills, spending his strength the way a grieving man does. In the night he was wakeful and restless. It is told that one December he arose before dawn and walked through the frost of the harsh stony land until he came to the hill of Tepeyac. Just as the day was breaking, he climbed the hill, and there came to him, first softly, and then louder, the sound of many birds' songs. The songs grew to unearthly music, so that he stopped and wondered, for the music seemed to come from everywhere. He looked up the hill, and the dawnlight was brighter than any he had ever seen. The music swelled and echoed about him. Juan Diego went toward the light from the hilltop, and a voice from the music said, "Juan Diego, come here." In a moment his grief was gone, and the fullness of beauty was in him. The path up the hill was lined with mesquite and cactus and sharp-wood stones. He came half running to the brow. The music swelled and retired, and he saw the Queen of Heaven standing in the rocky path with the light around her, so that the stones gathered it and glittered like jewels, and the dark mesquite was bright. For a moment Juan Diego gazed at her, and then he backed away in shyness and in fear. The vision said, "Juan Diego, my son, where do you walk?" And he answered, "My lady, I was walking in sorrow to find peace for my heart, but now I am not sad." The lady said, "Do you know who I am?" And he answered, "I think I know." She spoke quietly in the light. "I am Mary, the mother of Jesus, and I wish that there on this big hill a temple may be built in witness of my love for your people. I have seen the suffering of your people, and I have come to them through you." Juan Diego tried to speak, but she silenced him. "You must go to the bishop in Mexico and tell him that here by the hill of Tepeyac my temple must be built, from which my love may go out to all of your people." Juan Diego bowed. "I will go, my lady," he said, and he spoke. The light faded into ordinary day, and the stones were stones, and the mesquite black. The lady was gone. Juan Diego went slowly down the path, and the world was pale after his vision. He took the north way through the marshes, where the tall reeds grew, and his road was the stone causeway, for the valley of Mexico was a broad lake, and the city stood in the midst of it. Juan Diego was filled with terror now. He had never traveled to the city in all of his life. After his mud village, the growing buildings and the new churches were things of wonder to him. He asked his directions many times before he came to the palace of the bishop, a lordly building, magnificent, new. Humbly Juan Diego asked to see the bishop. The Bishop of Mexico was a scholarly man. From the first he had defended the Indians against the brutal soldiers and the nobles of Spain, and it was his custom to hear anyone who came to him. When Juan Diego was led to his chamber, the bishop expected a complaint or a petition. Many tragedies passed before him every day. Juan Diego looked at the splendor of the room. He who had never seen anything but coarse cactus fiber, cloth so crimson velvet. It was a room of carved wood and a colored plaster instead of the mud walls of his experience. The bishop looked up as the silence continued. Yes, my son, he said impatiently. Suddenly the words poured out of Juan Diego. The Queen of Heaven, he cried. I saw her in a pool of light on the hill of Tepayac. She told me you must build a temple to her by the hill. The bishop smiled wearily. Why there? To be a sign to our people, Juan Diego cried in triumph. She is ours, our own mother. Now the bishop frowned. You are excited, my son, he said. Go reflect and come back when you are calm. Go with God. His heart heavy with failure, Juan Diego went blindly in the evening to the hill of Tepeyac. For his vision was fading, and he was afraid the bishop had spoken the truth, and that his grieving had turned his mind to dreams. As he came to the hilltop, and the night was falling, the light sprang up, and the lady was before him again. Juan Diego fell to his knees in joy, for he knew now that he was right. But he felt weakness, and he cried, Holy Mother, send someone of importance, send some lord or better, shed your light on the bishop himself. Her voice was imperious. Juan Diego, I have chosen you for a reason to be understood only gradually, but it will be stronger because everyone will find the reason for himself. I have many messengers, but I have chosen you, Juan Diego, my son. Go as my messenger, and order the bishop to do so as I have said. Say to him that Holy Mary, ever Virgin, Mother of God, has sent you, that you and no other are the messenger. The light about her flared, and the whole valley glowed and sparkled. And then it was dark, and Juan Diego was alone on the desert hill of Tepayac. He went down the path to his mud house, and he washed himself, and ate a little, and lay down on his mat, but sleep would not come to him, for when he closed his eyes, he saw the light and the beauty again. Next, before dawn, he went again over the marshes and over the north causeway. As he approached the city, he heard the church bells ringing, for it was Sunday. The bishop had many duties on a Sunday, and Juan Diego squatted in a corner waiting. Again and again he demanded entrance, but the servants refused him. Now Juan Diego's message burned in him, and he shouted his demands. Tears were in his eyes, and the fury of frustration in his heart. The bishop heard him shouting, and quietly gave word to let him in. Juan Diego fell to the floor before the throne. Our Lady says you must build a temple, he cried. She says it is her wish. Do you hear? She orders the temple to be built in the valley by Tepayac. The bishop said sternly, You are ill. You are unbalanced, Juan Diego shouted. Our Lady orders you. The bishop sat quietly thinking, and then he said with calculation, I will tell you, words are empty, and men sometimes see things that are untrue. Ask for a sign beyond words. Then we will know beyond doubt. Now go. What sign? Juan Diego demanded. The bishop smiled and signaled, and the servants held Juan Diego's elbows and led him away. When he was gone, the bishop called two men and said, Follow Juan Diego. See where he goes, and see what he does, not that he does not hurt himself or any others. The men followed Juan Diego, and at last they came to a ravine before the valley before Tepayac, and a rare mist covered Juan Diego's from their sight. They could not find him anywhere. At last they returned to the city and told their story. The bishop sat alone, and he was troubled, and Juan Diego remained in his thoughts. The cloud moved along with Juan Diego, and it grew luminous. In the midst of it, the lady appeared. In his weariness, Juan Diego bowed and he said, The bishop wants a sign. He will not believe words, but he would not say what sign. The lady's voice was sweet to the weary man. Go to your rest, she said, and in the morning come again, and I will give you a sign. Then Juan Diego went toward his house, but on the way a neighbor came to him saying, your uncle is dying of the fever called cuculit, cucu, cuculitsto, the same that destroyed your wife. Juan Diego went toward his uncle's house and found breath. His uncle whispered to him, saying, go to Father de Grado. He knows curing herbs, and if they fail, he will give me the rights of the church. Juan Diego went to find him help for his uncle. His promise to the Holy Mother worried him, but it seemed good to him to have a humble duty to do, for her mission had frightened him. The emotion of it had wearied him, for one must bring something to great beauty, and it is a burden for a man to be a great man. He thought, I will not take the short cut over the hill of Tepayac. I will go the longer way around the hill, and then the Holy Mother will not see me, and I can put aside the duty. He said to himself, she could not blame me for trying to help uncle. He took the longer path, and he felt the mesquite bushes pulling at his cloak. His feet stumbled on the rocks in the dark rain, and suddenly the light broke around him, and the lady stood before him. In shame, Juan Diego knelt before her. I was coming to the hill as soon as I could get help from my uncle, he said. She replied with compassion, you cannot go around, my son. You cannot ever go around, particularly you. Forget your uncle. I have made him well. Go now to the right path over the hill of Tepayac and gather what you find there. Then Juan Diego went back to the hill path, and in that desolate place he saw roses of Castile, fresh and lovely, growing in a place where roses could not grow, and blooming in a frosty month when roses do not bloom. In the dawn he gathered the flowers, and then the Virgin was beside him, and she took the blooms from him and laid them in his cloak. This is my sign, she said. Go now to the bishop. Juan Diego came to the palace, and he entered carrying the roses wrapped in his cloak. The servants in the hall jeered at him, and they struck him and pulled at him to put him out of the hall. But Juan Diego guarded his cloak. It is the sign, he cried. I have brought the sign from the Holy Mother. As they pushed him, a corner of his cloak came free, and they saw the roses, and they were silent. One man put his hand to the flowers, and he could not touch them. And then he went quietly to the door of the bishop's chamber and opened it, and Juan Diego entered. The bishop looked at the Indian with annoyance, but Juan Diego was not afraid. Here is the sign, he said, and released the corners of his cloak, and the roses uncrushed and unwilted fell to the floor. And the bishop saw the cloak of Juan Diego, and he got to his knees on the rough cactus fiber cloak of the Indian. Juan Diego was the image of the Mother of God. At Tepayac, they raised a simple hermitage on the place where she had appeared, to serve until the temple could be fashioned. And Juan Diego built a new mud house near by the plant and planted a garden. He swept out of the chapel and cared for it until he died. He was very happy, and it is possible he did not know that through his heart Our Lady of Guadalupe had become the Holy Mother of his people. The end. Thank you for listening. The Miracle of Tepayac by John Steinbeck, read by Rose Walk on July 3, 2015. Have a blessed day, all. Thank you.